Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Play 2 podcast. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week, college football player Caleb Nix joins the show. At Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama, he was an all-state quarterback. As a senior, Caleb threw for 38 touchdowns and rushed for 12 more while leading Central to an appearance in the state title game. In 2022, Caleb walked on at Clemson where he switched to the defensive side of the field, playing safety and was a member of the Tigers' ACC championship team. Off the field, Caleb graduated in the top 10 of his high school class, and he made the All-ACC honor roll as a freshman. His brother, Bo Nix, is the starting quarterback at Oregon, who was just a Heisman Trophy finalist, and his father, Patrick Nix, played quarterback at Auburn in the 1990s. Caleb, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. My first question is, and it kind of sounds like something being in the blood, but how did your football interest grow?
Well, my dad, as you just said, was a college football player. And then following his career, he immediately got into college coaching and he went through those steps, became a college coach at different schools, Miami, Georgia Tech, Jacksonville State, Samford. My granddad was a high school football coach for a long, long time. And so I just grew up in it. And really, as much as my love for football, it was just my love for sports. If we were at home watching TV, it was more than likely Sports Center, or it was an actual game going on, whether that was baseball, football, basketball. So really, it was just my love for sports. And then as I grew up and I was around my dad's job and just being at football practice and I began playing and I just really fell in love with the sport.
With your dad being a quarterback and your brother being a quarterback, is that the reason as you were growing up you gravitated to quarterback as well?
Yes, I would say definitely both of them playing quarterback would be the reason. Growing up with an older brother that played quarterback, if we're playing in the backyard or something, I wasn't the quarterback. I like to joke when we were little that we had two plays. We had the quarterback sneak and we had the quarterback draw, and I was the center on both of them. But I remember being little and I wanted to play receiver because that's what I would do. And we'd go in the backyard, Bo would be the quarterback and I'd be running the routes. Actually, my dad didn't allow us to play tackle football until middle school, but I was around my dad's practices every day from about the second or third grade on. My mom would pick me up from school or I'd ride the bus over to his high school. I'd be out there, I'd be the ball boy. As I got a little bit older, fifth and sixth grade, I would be the scout team quarterback sometimes. I would do all sorts of stuff on the practice field as just a glorified manager, I guess you could say. And then I think the knowledge of the game is a big reason why I began playing quarterback, because when you get to that middle school level, I kind of did have an upper hand on most of my classmates and teammates regarding the knowledge of the game. And then because both of them were and are successful quarterbacks, I already knew most of the mechanics. I could throw it pretty well. So when you combine that, it was a pretty natural fit. And then I didn't throw the ball very much in middle school. I just ran. And so that's just kind of how I ended up playing quarterback.
You said something I wanted to follow up on. Your dad didn't let you play tackle football until middle school. What was the reason for that decision?
It's actually my granddad did it with him. And so like most things just passed down. So he did it with Bo and I as well. That was quite a few reasons. We played flag football for a few years, but really two main reasons. He just had the belief that we would get more out of being with him at practice, not directly, obviously, with him all day, but with his coaching staff and hearing him coach the quarterbacks. And he said, if I'm working with the defense at the time, doing whatever, helping with the dummies and stuff, I'm hearing their coaching. And he just had the belief that would pay more dividends in the long run. And he and my mom just didn't like the idea of playing football and doing the Oklahoma drill at the age of 6 and all the way through. And I do agree that our bodies really can only take so many hits. And starting at that young age, I will probably do the same thing with my kids. Just try to get them around the game, but not necessarily a super physical game until they are a little bit older. And middle school was the age that they decided. And I'm actually thankful for it. I remember, especially when I got about fifth and sixth grade, I would argue with my dad, just let me play. And he didn't budge. But once I got to seventh grade, it was definitely worth the wait.
From all the observations that you had at such a young age in practice, what was a very important lesson that you've carried throughout your football career?
Oh, that's a good question. I think just as a leader, and my dad was a head coach in high school, and just seeing the structure and how he's managed it. And high school is different than college or the NFL. And you're the equipment manager, you're the head coach, you deal with parents, you deal with everything. So just seeing how he managed all of that was not valuable to me then. I didn't realize how valuable it was, but I like to joke with him that I could come and do his job and I think I'd do it all right. And that's only because I would just follow exactly what he would do. And then as far as football goes, all of the basic fundamentals of everything regarding the game, I could relate to being on the field in those days. Typically summer workouts. Now I wouldn't necessarily work out with the actual weight, but they'd be pushing sleds with say 2 or 3 plates on it. And I'd be down there with sled with nothing on it, but I was still just building those fundamental foundations that have really helped me up to this point, and it'll help me for the rest of my career.
When you talk about building the foundation from a player's point of view, what's the correct way to lay that foundation?
Well, I'd say the most important part of my foundation just individually is my spiritual side, which isn't necessarily football, but it definitely helps in all areas. And that's another lesson that my dad and my granddad have passed on, is the spiritual side and their faith in Jesus Christ. And that has been a huge impact on me. But when you get into the player aspect, I think a huge piece of the foundation is knowledge and understanding the game. Turn on a football game and be able to understand, all right, these are kind of the decisions that the quarterback should be making, like can't take a sack here, or you have to force the ball right here, or just thinking as a head coach, oh, you need to go for 2 here and you take a timeout. Just in-depth understanding of the game. And then also competitiveness, which serves in all areas of life, but it's definitely something that is essential, I think. And it's really helped me with my story. I've had different adversities here and there, and just being a competitor is always essential to just helping your career.
When you face adversity, especially as a quarterback in high school, let's say, you're the leader of the team. How do you handle that in communicating your message to the team?
I would say the number one thing about handling your adversity, and in a situation of being the quarterback of your high school team, you're most of the time clearly the leader on your team. It just comes with a position. And I think it's just not changing who you are or what you do. If you're preparing how you should prepare, and if you're working like you should, and you play bad, but you move on and you do the same thing next week and you prepare the same way, and being consistent, I think, is very important. Adversity is going to come, but it's just going on to the next week or the next play. It's not letting that one play just crush you, especially at the high school level. It's amazing how your teammates, they look at you and they're like, all right, he's going to keep playing, then I'll just do the same thing and follow along. It's the same thing with the coaching staff. And I think it's that way at every level, but especially at the high school level.
Some quarterbacks are more vocal than others. How important is it for the quarterback to be a strong vocal leader?
That's a good question, because everybody's a little bit different. I think that there is ways that you can lead by example as a quarterback, but it is a position that you still have to have a voice. Your voice has to be able to carry weight. I think that different situations call for different things. If you're a first-year starter, you might just lead by example, earn people's trust, earn people's respect. If you're a 3rd-year, 4th-year guy, or in the NFL, you've been in the league for 15 years, I think your voice does matter. And I think people tend to look at that position because it is kind of the most important position on the field. And it is important to be a vocal leader, not necessarily always, but it is important to have that voice in the locker room and have a voice that when you talk, everybody's going to listen. I'm more of a lead by example, servant leader myself. That's just kind of how I've always been. But no matter how you lead, it's important that when you speak, that people listen, they want to listen, they hear what you say, they respect what you have to say. You have to be careful that I think sometimes you can lead vocally too much. Let guys lead themselves as well, and you don't always have to be talking. But I do think that, especially as a quarterback, you need to have a voice and be able to use it to lead those around you.
To me, it somewhat sounds like a little bit of a delicate balance. How do you learn how to balance it to where you don't go one way or the other?
I think it's really just a feel thing. You have to know the guys on your team. That's why it's so important to just have relationships with your teammates, and that's whether you're a quarterback or not. In my situation now at Clemson, very few people come in college, period, and be a vocal leader. I walked on, I switched position playing defense, but it's the way that you can build relationships with your teammates, and that's what makes your voice matter. That's why they'll trust you and listen to you. And it's different for every player. It's a balance. As a quarterback, it might be different for your running back as it is somebody on defense that you might not be around all the time in meetings and everything. And some teams, they're self-led. The leaders, they don't have to be very vocal because guys are going to follow what you do. Some teams, they aren't like that, and you have to kind of help pull everybody together and keep everybody aligned. So I think it's really just a feel thing, and that's why, especially like NFL, you see some people are incredible leaders for long periods of time, and I think they just have a great feel of how to do it, and their teammates just respect them.
Speaking of the NFL, growing up, who are some of the football players that you looked up to, whether it be pro or the college game?
I would say one of the earliest players I remember watching, and I was young, so I didn't watch a lot of him, but I remember as I got into football, I watched a lot of his highlights, heard his speeches, and that would be Tim Tebow would definitely be probably the first one that I looked up to. And then growing up an Auburn fan, because that's where my dad played, my mom went, Cam Newton As a player at Auburn, he kind of did everything that you'd want to do. If you have a dream in college, it's either win a national championship, win the Heisman, be the first overall pick. Cam Newton did all of it. So he was one that I kind of looked up to. And then as I got a little bit older, I started hitting that middle school age was about the same time that Marcus Mariota was playing at Oregon and doing so well. And that's kind of a guy that I wanted to play like. I loved how he ran the ball, and he wasn't just a runner. So that's kind of who I modeled my game after. And all these are quarterbacks, obviously, because I played quarterback in high school. But as far as professionally, Drew Brees was one guy that I always looked up to and kind of admired how he handled himself, how he was a leader, his faith. I remember hearing stories about him taking his offensive linemen on trips or out to eat every so often. I remember when he broke the all-time NFL passing record that he sent every offensive lineman that had played for him, he sent him a ball. I just think he handled himself so well that he was a guy that I professionally looked up to.
Have you had a chance to meet any of those players that you've mentioned to pick their brain a little bit?
I've actually had a chance to meet Cam Newton and Tim Tebow, both kind of briefly, but I didn't know for sure if I was going to play quarterback when I was little. And so I used to watch Ed Reed highlights and Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis was one of my favorite, even though I knew I wasn't going to play linebacker. I love watching Ray Lewis and listening to some of his stories and his leadership videos and all of that. So I would also add Ray Lewis to that list.
I interviewed Tebow when he was at the high school All-American game in 2006, I think. Big guy.
It's really big. It explains why he played the way he did. See, I can't really model my game after you. You're a little bit bigger than I am or ever will be.
And I will say this, because he is very outspoken about his faith, and I will say he is very kind, very nice.
Well, I actually met Tim Tebow at an FCA event in Birmingham, Alabama. He was speaking. So that was really neat. And that just kind of shows the type of person he is, that he's going to come speak at an FCA event.
Growing up, your dad kind of moved around a little bit when you were young with different jobs, both as a college assistant and then as a high school head coach. What was it kind of like moving around from place to place?
It was tough, but I really didn't know any different. That's just how it was. I lived in Atlanta for the first 4 years of my life. And probably by the time I was going into middle school, I'd probably moved, I'd have to count it up to actually know, but probably 6 times. I think Clemson's the 9th place I've lived. So it's just kind of what we did. I also have 2 sisters along with my brother, Bo. One thing that has been a blessing out of it, how close we became, because we were the group that you could always count on to be there. If you've only lived in a place for 3 years and then you move, you're starting over again and you're making new friends and all of that. But the one thing that always stayed the same was us. And so I think we contribute that to why our group of siblings and our entire family is so close today and hopefully for the rest of our life.
Do you and your siblings talk every day, have a text string to where you keep in touch?
So actually, we had a sibling one. So my brother's married and then my older sister is married as well. So we had a sibling one with those 2 in-laws. And then honestly, my parents kind of got a little bit jealous. So now it's an entire family one. So we're at 9 now. So it's our entire family. And that text message is pretty much every day. Some serious stuff. If you see a message from my mom, it's probably going to be somebody's birthday today. Wish them happy birthday. Or it's some sort of official, like, here's the itinerary of our Christmas vacation or whatever it is. But then as far as everybody else, we'll have some good-hearted fun. And as far as talking on the phone, I talk to pretty much all of my siblings. I'd say probably once, twice a week. And it depends. Sometimes you're busier. We don't have like a set schedule or anything, but we do stay in touch as best as we can. And we have a Snapchat group where we'll send funny videos or Instagram text message. Usually one of them is always ringing and always constantly going.
Out of everybody on the text string, who has the best sense of humor?
I would definitely say me, but they may differ. I don't know.
You mentioned your mom, and especially with your dad being a coach, a lot of the day-to-day stuff falls on mom. How important was she in your life growing up, especially when your dad's away coaching a lot, even if you were going to practices?
My mom is incredible. There's no doubt about that. My mom decided originally when she went to Auburn, she was a teaching major. She taught for a little bit after school, and then she stopped to help raise all the kids. Well, one of the coolest things that I've ever seen anyone do is one of her dreams was she always wanted to be a nurse. So she decided she was going back to nursing school. Every day she'd go to nursing school, yet she still found ways to be at her baseball games or football games, whatever it was, she was there. And I remember she'd be at a baseball game and she'd be sitting there with her nursing book and she'd be studying for a big exam. And it was kind of the other mom's duty to make sure that my mom was aware if one of us was about to hit. And she has a great sense of sport as well. So she knew like when to watch, when not to. And after she got done with nursing school, she was a night nurse for a while. which again was absolutely incredible. She'd work all night. She'd come home. A lot of times she would drive us to school. So my mom has definitely been absolutely incredible. Someone I look up to and just an incredible person.
What's a favorite memory aside from her being a night nurse that you have with her?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's give me a minute to think. One of my favorite memories with my mom would be one of the first times we went to Disney World. She wants to go ride It's a Small World, which mom, if you go to Disney World or something, she's planning the whole trip, right? When we're going to It's a Small World, we're going to go. The first time I remember, I'm like, what's It's a Small World? And I'm pretty little. Well, I don't remember if it was Bo or Emma Grace, my older sister. They roll their eyes and we just ride around and they sing. Well, I thought they said sink, not sing. And so I get into the boat and I remember I am just scared to death the entire ride. And I'm sitting right there up under my mom's arm. I don't know if the cartoon's singing to us or going to sink or if we're going to sink. I just remember being scared to death the entire ride. And then I get off and I asked my mom and I was like, we didn't sink. And I was thankful. And she's like, what are you talking about? I have that memory. And then we haven't been to Disney World in quite a few years, but we have been since that time. And if we go, wait line for It's a Small World and we're going to ride it because my mom wants to. And you just do what your mom wants, right?
Oh, of course, what mom wants, mom gets.
Yes, absolutely. Recently, this is just a cool mom thing that kind of probably only a mom would do, right? Oregon State on Friday night, and it's both senior night. So my mom flies out for that. She's there in Eugene, watches the game. Well, then she gets the idea of Clemson is playing South Carolina, and she's like, what's the next day? I think I could make it back. So she gets a flight early enough to where she lands in Atlanta. My dad times it up and has to drive through Atlanta to get to Columbia anyway, and picks up my mom. And in the span of 24 hours, my mom goes from the Oregon State game to the Clemson South Carolina game and is at both. And which is amazing. And my poor dad was playing in the semifinals in the Alabama high school, and she just ditched him and came and watched us. But that's a pretty cool story itself.
That's awesome. That definitely sounds like what a mom would do. Going back to your high school career, you played at two different high schools. You played at Pinson Valley your first 2 years, and then Central and Phoenix City your last 2 years. What was the difference between the two schools, and how come you went from one to the other?
The way we got from one to the other was my dad's job. We were at Pinson Valley. We were there, and it was a perfect place for us at the time. We were there for 3 years. The first 2 years, we won the state championship. The third year, we made it to the semifinals. So it was a very successful tenure there. And it was a great school. We won the basketball state championship my freshman year. So my parents, because we moved around, have always what's best for the kids that are at home. And so my dad just felt like that was a good opportunity. It was a little bit of a bigger high school. It was a little bit closer to my dad's parents, about the same distance from my mom. So there was a lot of good things to it. And my dad just felt like it was a good place to go and stay for a longer period of time. And so that's why we moved. We've had great success at both, and I loved both.
Moving in high school isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. How are you able to make the transition smoothly going from one to another? Because basically you're trying to meet a whole new set of teammates who might know your name but don't know who you are.
A lot of people originally hear that you moved and they're like, oh, that's kind of better. You didn't have to necessarily play in Bo's shadow. And actually, after experiencing it, it may have actually made that a little bit worse because when you move, they all know your brother's name. They don't know yours yet. And so their first thought of you, their first knowledge of you is, oh, you're Bo's brother. Whereas the high school where I moved from, the people in my grade, we played middle school basketball, we played middle school football, baseball. So we already knew each other and they knew me, not as Bo's brother, but as me. So that was actually probably an added thing that people would assume would be easier, but actually was probably a little bit harder. And then I had the unique experience of moving right before COVID. The pandemic happened. So that definitely added a twist that's really never happened before, right? So I moved in February, right after basketball season ended. I was there for 1 month and maybe a couple weeks, probably like 5 weeks there until we hit spring break, and then we never went back to school. So that made my junior year very tough because I'd only been around those teammates for 5 weeks of workouts, which is not very long at all, especially to build trust. So that made the junior year different. But then the transition of moving into my senior year, having that full off season was huge. Every day being in there, instead of 5 weeks, it was 5 months of off season workouts. Then you get to summer workouts. And then having a year under my belt of playing and earning people's respect, it made my senior year that's more special, I think, because of how tough the junior year was. But moving at any age is hard, but that one's different than all of them because you add in the COVID pandemic.
I got two things to follow up on that. The first one is You mentioned that people kept calling you Bo's brother. Does it bother you that you're called Bo's brother as opposed to Caleb?
Not really. I know that as people get to know me, that they're going to refer to me as Caleb. Growing up, he was older than me anyway. So before he had notoriety nationally, still kind of get called Bo's brother if you're in school. And the same teachers that taught him are teaching you, then that's how every kid is. Even if it's just somebody else that their brother never goes on to reach the notoriety that Bo has, you're still whoever's brother because you just came behind them. And so that was kind of just expected. And then I can't really get mad at anybody for it because before they know me, that's how they know me. And so I am Bo's brother because they know Bo, and then I'm his brother. So just naturally, that's what they're going to refer to me as. But I think that as people get to know me, they get to know me as Caleb.
And the second thing is, with COVID, how did you end up meeting teammates? Were there group Zoom calls? How did you guys kind of stay sharp and prepare for what may or may not have been a season your junior year?
It was definitely different. Luckily, I had at least 5 weeks. So I at least had something and I knew pretty much everybody's name and they knew me. And now, did we have a relationship? No, but we knew each other. So that was good. And yes, we had group Zoom calls as it went on. And at first, it was the same for everybody. Nobody had any idea, like, is there going to be a season? Is there not? So our school used Google Classroom. So we made like a Google Classroom for football and they'd post a workout and you could do that workout. And it was all stuff either around the house or just all body weight. And then being in Alabama, we actually had a regular season as far as 10 games and then playoffs. Now it was different. You didn't go to school every day. It was like a every other day system. I don't really recall exactly what it was, but we weren't in the cafeteria together. So it was definitely different that I was playing with guys that I really felt like I didn't know. Now on the offensive side, I felt like by the end of the year, I knew them pretty well, but defensively, it was a little bit of a divide, which I think kind of hurt us that year. Just not having the continuity of a coaching staff and players that knew each other really well. And I think that a lot of the schools that did well that year were the ones that had a group coming back that had been playing with each other. And so that COVID didn't necessarily affect their relationship. They knew each other. They knew their coaching staff. I think that's why there was such a big jump between my junior year and my senior year.
During COVID, when you couldn't work out with everybody, did you and your brother kind of use each other as, let's say, a wide receiver?
Oh, absolutely. And then I also have an adopted brother that actually plays receiver at Oregon now. So he would have been at Troy at the time. And so all three of us, we were at home and we were working out all the time. Luckily, we have a field near our house, just this open field right outside our neighborhood. And we were there pretty much every day, just working, running. We would set up drills to try to stay sharp agility wise. When my brother-in-law came into town, we would play some 2-on-2. We'd have an all-time quarterback and we would make a small field. Now, was it for fun? Yes, but it was also to stay sharp and we would rotate quarterback and it would be for us to throw to moving targets and tight windows. And it was just like everybody, it was just finding what you could do to stay sharp. And I remember we bought boxing gloves and we had a dummy and we would box the dummy and we'd go out at like midnight and we'd go and we'd box for however long just to try to stay in shape and just do whatever we could to use what we had to stay strong and stay ready for the season and get out of the boredom of just sitting at home all day.
For you in high school, you played multiple sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, in addition to football. How hard was it to balance everything?
I would say that it really wasn't as hard as what you might think because I did it my whole growing up. From being little all the way up to high school, I played the three sports, and my favorite sport was whatever season we were in until probably middle school when I was like, all right, football is my favorite sport. But I played basketball and baseball all the way up to middle school. My freshman year of high school, I hurt my back and I actually wasn't able to play baseball that year. So I just played football and basketball. Then the next year, my sophomore year, I played football, basketball. I was planning on playing baseball. I was going to play all three, and COVID happened right there at the beginning of baseball season, shut it down. My junior year and senior year, I played football and baseball both, which I had a good baseball coach. My baseball coach understood that I was a football player playing baseball at that point in my career of high school. And so it wasn't overly hard. It was just kind of like what I did. I was always busy, and I didn't really realize I was busy just because I loved playing baseball. We were actually really, really good. My junior year, we won the area. We made it all the way to the semifinals. If I'm not mistaken, my junior year, we actually won more games than any team in the school history. And then the next year we followed it up and we won the state championship, which was the first state championship in baseball in the school history. So even though I knew I was a football player, it was absolutely worth playing baseball. I loved it. I would do it over and over again. And part of me wishes that I wouldn't have had that back injury my freshman year and I could have played baseball. And part of me does think that If I don't get those 2 seasons, my freshman and sophomore year of high school, taken away, it would have been interesting to see how my baseball career would have ended up and if I would have pursued baseball over football.
For you, what skills from the baseball field translated to the football field?
I would say as far as athletic skills, it's not overly the same. Now, I think throwing a football and hitting a baseball have similar characteristics as far as just your hip drive and your torque and that type of thing. I would say basketball actually probably translates better athletically to football, and definitely the basketball traits of covering somebody and moving laterally and all that definitely translate better to what I'm doing now, playing safety. But baseball is an adversity filled game, which all sports are, but probably not another one like baseball. If you're in professional baseball and you fell 7 out of 10 times, you're probably making the Hall of Fame, which can't be said about any other sport. If you fell 7 out of 10 times as a quarterback in the NFL, you're never going to play again. And so it just teaches you how to handle adversity. It teaches you that you've got to go to the next at bat or you got to move on. So I think baseball, it's definitely one of the toughest mental games, if not the toughest. And so I think mentally it is extremely good to play, and it prepares you for different sports, football or any other sport.
You sort of touched on this. Do you ever wonder what could have been where baseball might have been the path as opposed to football?
I do, really just out of curiosity, kind of like what would have happened. I was a pretty good baseball player growing up. My 8th grade year, I had a really good year. And so it was kind of setting up to where I knew I liked football the best, but I loved baseball too. And so it was kind of one of those, maybe I will end up being better at baseball. My brother-in-law, he was a collegiate baseball player. He's actually a college baseball coach now. So seeing him play baseball in college, one of those that like, maybe I do want to do that. But having those 2 years taken away, it's hard enough in any sport to miss 2 years, but missing 2 years, it kind of takes away any dreams you have of moving on to the next level. My junior year, I didn't have the greatest year of baseball. We were really good. I actually served as like a backup third baseman. I was the courtesy runner. In high school, you can run for the pitcher or catcher. And so my claim to fame that year was I led the state in stolen bases. So if the pitcher or catcher got on, I was going to go run for him, which was a really fun year. It was kind of a fun role to be in. I like to joke that in big games, my role was just go steal a base. That's a whole nother story about just embracing your role. But my senior year, having that year of playing baseball my junior year, it definitely helped me. I had a much better senior year. But I could hit a fastball, but if you threw anything else other than a fastball, I was probably not going to hit it. And at a certain point in the year, the opposing coaches pick up on it. I know this kid's a football player and pretty big and strong and athletic, and he can smoke a fastball. So let's throw some of this off speed and see what he does with it. And I was reminded again that, all right, maybe I'm not going to take the next step in baseball.
You led the stolen bases in the 1980s. You'd have gotten looks from scouts, regardless of what you could do at the plate.
Yep. And now I go try to steal a base on anyone. They would throw me out, no doubt.
Your senior year is a pretty good year. You account for 50 combined touchdowns, which not many players at any level of football can say, no matter who they are. You get to a state title game. Kind of take me through the ride of that whole year.
As I said, my junior was a little bit tougher. Now, we went 8-5. We actually made the semifinals. We upset a team in the quarterfinals, but I would say it wasn't necessarily a successful semifinal run. The school that I was at, that's kind of the expectation, is to make it to that level. And so we were coming into the year following kind of, you could say, a down year. We were coming in with a few new faces at different positions, and we were kind of starting all unknown. How's the season going to go? Like, how good are we actually going to be? Everybody was like, I think we have a chance to be really good. We don't really know. Well, the first game, we traveled to a team in Georgia, and they're opening up a brand new stadium, and we actually get the ball first. And so first play of the game, we throw like a little screen pass to the running back, and he takes it 80 yards for a touchdown. And then we played really good that game. We won really big. We just kind of continued to play like that. And then after a couple of weeks, it's okay, like we're really good. We went through the whole year, had a great year. We ended up undefeated in the regular season. We made it. We played our arch rival in the semifinals, and it was kind of the first game that we trailed in. We had trailed for just a few minutes the week before. The other team scored first when they got the ball, but then we didn't trail again the rest of the game. And so it was the first game, my senior semifinals. We were losing 17-7 at halftime, actually. Kind of our first time facing adversity, but we knew that we were really good, and no one blinked. I remember that halftime being really calm, and I remember all of us just being in the locker room, and we were all right. We were going to be fine. We're going to come back and win. And we ended up coming back, and we won 28-17. It was a really fun game. For most of the year, we were really good at throwing the ball. And then we kind of got in that game, and we had some injuries at receiver, and we couldn't throw the ball. And we came out in the second half, and I just remember kind of thinking, we're not losing this game. We're going to do whatever we have to win the game. And I ran the ball a bunch in the second half. I had a few huge runs. One for sure is my favorite play of high school. And then we took the lead late in the fourth quarter on a touchdown run. And then TJ Parker, the defensive end, had a sack fumble. We scored. That was an amazing game to go to the state championship. And then the state championship, we didn't get it done. We played a really good team and we ended up losing by 2 touchdowns. But it was a special season nonetheless. And definitely memories I look back on and always cherish.
Take me through that favorite play of high school in the state semifinal game, if you don't mind.
Well, it was 17-14 with about 6 or 7 minutes left. We just got a first down. We were on our own 40-yard line, roughly, and we motioned the running back out of the backfield, and we're either throwing a swing pass to him or it's a quarterback counter with me. And so the linebacker takes off running with the running back, so I know I'm running it. And it was kind of just a congested play at the line. We had some penetration. Our pullers didn't really get around for our counter, and so I bounced it pretty much immediately. Kind of hit the sideline with the linebacker chasing me. And then the safety from over top is coming down too. So they kind of both have an angle on me, one from a little bit behind, one from coming down over top. And I remember I kind of hit the sideline, and sometimes in those moments, even though the moment's happening fast, you remember what you were thinking and your thoughts are kind of slow sometimes. And I remember hitting the sideline, and it was kind of one of those runs that I just decided I could go out of bounds right here. I could try to get a few more yards, or I think I could try to go score. And I remember that as a guy from behind tried to dive and grab me, I cut back on him and I split both of them. Then I'm pretty much in the clear. So I'm running and there's still some DBs down the field and everything. So I'm still running and I'm now reverse field going back to the left and I'm running and then guy cuts me off. And so I cut back going to the right this time. And I got in a pile at about the 3-yard line and a few of my receivers are pushing me. I'm still driving and I got in the end zone to take the lead. And so it was like a 60-yard touchdown run. That was definitely my favorite play of high school and probably one of my favorite plays ever.
When you get to the state championship game, because you had just beaten your big rival, was there any letdown, I guess, to start the game? And maybe that kind of led to not coming out on top in that game?
I'd say no. I think we were all ready for the game. Obviously, any state championship is going to be a big game, but we were playing another team that it had kind of been us and them all year that everybody kind of projected to be there. And every team's banged up and has injuries by the end of the year. But like I said, a receiver in the game before, we were really reeling at receiver and we had a few guys banged up. So it was just one of those games that we were playing the best team that we had played so far in the season. And they made a few huge plays offensively. They had a little receiver that had an incredible game, ended up winning the MVP of the game. And it was just a perfect storm. We turned the ball over a few times. And I wouldn't say that there was a letdown. I would just say that we just lost. If we play again, it might have been different. It would definitely, I think, been a little bit closer had we taken care of the ball. But I wouldn't say there was a letdown. It was just the other team was good and they just got the job done and we didn't.
Some days it's just not one's day.
No, it wasn't our day that day. And it'll probably be one of those losses that always stays with me. But I'm just thankful that we got there and that I got to play in the state championship. Luckily, my 8th grade year and my freshman year, we won the state championship, which would have been Bo's junior and senior year. So my freshman year, I actually was the long snapper and the short snapper on special teams. So I did get to play in the state championship and win it. And yes, I lost the last state championship, but at least I did win one in football.
I didn't know you were a long snapper, which is a very important part to the game that I think often gets overlooked. How did you end up getting in that role?
Well, I kind of always just knew I could do it. I don't really know when I knew I could do it, but a lot of times someone who can throw can snap. It's kind of a similar thing, especially long snapping. And I remember we were at the lake for 4th of July and we're throwing. And at the end of throwing, Bo and I, he's going to his senior year. I'm going into my freshman year. So I'm going to be one of the backup quarterbacks. And I don't remember if I was just messing around. I think if I recall right, I was just joking around. I was like, watch this. And I told him to back up to 14 yards and I just shoot one back there. And he was like, holy cow, that was really good. And so somebody gets a phone out and they video it and send it to my dad because he was our head coach. So it started then. And we had an older linebacker that started the year as the long snapper, but he played every snap on defense. So he was expected to be the long snapper. But once I kind of proved that I could do it, it was like, we'll let you do it. So one really cool thing that is actually some cool memories is that Bo was the punter and the holder, and I was a snapper for both. So I got to snap to him. So we got to be on the field together. And one funny story, we're in the semifinals and he's the punter, like I said, and I had a bad snap. It was a little bit of a low snap. Well, he picks it up and it's a big moment, the semifinals game, and he throws it back to me. And I swear it was one of the hardest throws that he's ever thrown, right back at my chest, and tells me to give him a good snap. And I was like, my bad. Okay, I'll be better next time. And the next one was a good snap. But yep, so I was the long snapper and the short snapper. Actually, believe it or not, my first time being the long snapper, I snap it back to him. He punts it. We're playing a team, second game of the year. It's pouring rain. I run down there and I'm a freshman and it's my first real play on varsity. So I'm running down as fast as I can. And the punt returner is going to catch it around the 10-yard line and it bounces off his shoulder pads and rolls in the end zone. And I don't stop running. I just keep running and I slide and fall on it in the end zone. So that was a pretty cool little story to remember as well.
In high school, is it the same rule in the NFL where the punt is given back to the team on the 10-yard line, or were you awarded a touchdown?
So originally they gave me a touchdown. We were about to line up to kick the extra point. And like I said, I'm the short snapper. And then a ref comes in and they start discussing it. And they ended up giving it back to him at the 10-yard line, which later we found out that it should have been a touchdown. So they did take it away from me, but I like to leave that part of the story out.
I think that's a good idea. I approve of that. You get to play with your brother. Your dad's the coach. What's that whole environment like? Because you're part of a team on the field, but at home, there's still the family relationship.
Yeah, it was definitely a dynamic that not many people get to be under. Not only was it me and Bo, but like I mentioned earlier, my adopted brother Tez, he was a receiver, had a great year that year that we were all together as well. But it's different all throughout high school. When my dad would come home, I would have already gotten on huddle and I've already watched practice. I already kind of know where I messed up. I kind of already know the questions I want to ask him. And so it's like an extension of the meeting room, which a lot of people that are in those situations say that they try to leave football at football and home at home. But we would talk football at home, but it was what we loved. If we're going to go sit and watch the TV together, we're probably going to turn on football. So instead of watching college football or NFL, which we did, but instead of necessarily talking about that while the Monday night football or Thursday night football game's going on, we'd be talking about the script for the Friday night of what plays we want to run, what we feel comfortable with, which is a really cool dynamic that I loved and that I'm very glad that I got to play for my dad. And I think Bo would say the same thing.
Do you miss not having that now that you're in college?
I do. I still talk to him quite often. I think that's the reason is because he was my coach and so I can call him. And there's a lot of players that say that, oh yeah, I call my high school coach or I call my old quarterback coach or something, kind of when you just want to rant or you want to talk ball or you did something good at practice or whatever's happening. And mine's kind of the 2-in-1. I call my high school coach, which just happens to be my dad. And then sometimes it's fun. He'll call me and he'll kind of get my opinion on something. He'll be like, watch this, or I'll send you something. And what do you think about this? Because I play defense now, so we're breaking down all other teams. And it's like, if you ever see a good route concept or something, send it to me. And so I do miss it, but we continue to kind of keep that aspect of the relationship going as well.
What was the recruiting process like for you? Because I know you walked on in Clemson, but before we get there, did you have any scholarship offers?
Yes, I did. I'd say for me, the recruiting process was pretty frustrating. Like I mentioned earlier, my freshman back injury kind of put me a little bit behind. Recruiting obviously starts probably earlier than it should. So I kind of missed that camp season until the end. And I got my first scholarship that year at a camp at Troy, which I was extremely grateful for. And I went into my sophomore season. I split time with the other quarterback. I had not a great year, but going into the next year, it was kind of like, all right, this is going to be your big camp year. You're going to go and try to do good at all these camps. And then COVID shut down any of the camps, right? And so that hurt me. And then I had a few more scholarship offers from other schools similar to Troy. I had Louisiana Monroe, Samford, Central Arkansas, Austin Peay, some schools like that. And I actually was going to commit to Troy. And right before I was going to commit, just a couple of days, they were recruiting 2 quarterbacks and the other quarterback committed. And they had already told us they were taking 1 quarterback. So I was out, which at the time I was pretty disappointed, but it was definitely God protecting me. Not that I wouldn't have went to Troy and loved it. He was just closing a door so that he could open up another one, which he did. And like we mentioned, I had a really good senior year. I put some really good film on tape. And a lot of the schools that would take a guy like me who was a little bit undersized to play quarterback and didn't have the greatest arm for a true Power 5 place, a lot of those group of 5 type schools that were recruiting me ended up taking transfer portal guys. And it was about the same time the transfer portal really opened up and became the thing that it is. And so I missed out on some of those schools. And then it came down really either walking on or either a lower tier FCS or Division II school. And whether it's right or wrong, that my dream was to kind of play at this level, which there's no knock to Division II or FCS. If there's an FCS playoffs game, I'll watch it. And I really loved some of those schools that I visited. It's just probably because I was around it growing up with my dad at the different places. I'd been to a lot of those games. And then Bo's recruiting process and going to watch Bo. I'd been to pretty much all the big stadiums in the South. I'd been to a lot of those. I've been to a few in the Big Ten. I just had seen those atmospheres, and that was what I wanted. That was kind of my dream. And so I did really well in high school academically. It allowed me to get into Clemson and earn a pretty good out-of-state scholarship academic-wise. And so it allowed me to walk on here. And then Coach Sweeney gave me a preferred walk-on spot. And at the time, we were pretty full at quarterback, and which I knew if I walk on, there's no guarantee to play quarterback. And honestly, quarterback might be the hardest spot to walk on and play at. So I was open to playing something else. So he said, you have a preferred walk-on spot, and it may be at receiver, it may be at safety. Not sure yet. And I decided that whatever I played, this is where I wanted to be. And I wanted to play for Coach Sweeney and play for Clemson. And so I decided to come here. And then that's when he told me, we're going to start you at safety. We can evaluate it after a year or two if we need to, but it's been good so far. So that was my recruiting journey. And that's how I ended up playing safety here at Clemson.
How hard was the position switch just because you're basically now playing football in a mirror?
Yep, I'll tell you, one of the weirdest and hardest things is when I draw plays now, if I'm taking notes in my notebook, our defense coordinator's up there drawing on the board. It took me probably my entire first fall that my brain, I'm like, he's drawing it upside down. I know why the offense is at the top, the defense is at the bottom, because that's how you draw it defensively. But my whole life, if I'm at my dad's office just messing around on the whiteboard, I'm drawing up plays. I'm not drawing up coverages or blitzes. And so I draw plays upside down now. But the position change was definitely hard. It's one of those that I understood coverages because I played quarterback, but there's one thing of understanding the coverage, and then there's another thing of understanding how to play the coverages. And it's more than just you're the flat player in cover 3, but it's how do you get there? Where do you line up? Just like it is in everything, there's a lot more to it than just what you see from the outside. And then I don't know if there's a harder thing in football than man coverage. I've never done that before. So that obviously and it still is taking a lot of work. And it was definitely a transition. I think because I played quarterback, it was decently smooth because I could understand the pass concepts and what the offense was trying to do. I already had a good knowledge of coverages and been able to make some plays and practice and stuff just because I can see the route happening, kind of like a quarterback can. I know that when this receiver runs this, well, what's the other receiver going to run? Well, all teams run concepts, and there's only so many concepts that you're going to run, and it just comes to me naturally because I have played quarterback and I have been around my dad's job, and he's been offensive coach forever. And just I know those pass concepts, and I know what teams are trying to run, which has been beneficial.
Because now you're reacting instead of doing. How long did that take for those instincts to kick in?
Believe it or not, I would say those instincts of making a play on the ball really just kind of came natural and honestly came easier than I anticipated. First couple times, say you're running with a receiver on a deep ball and you have to look back for the ball. It kind of came more natural to me than I probably anticipated as far as just turning and making a play on the ball. And same thing with tackling. I never really tackled before, other than those few special teams plays, like I was saying, of running down and trying to tackle a punt returner. And even running the ball in high school as quarterback, somebody told me once that Tim Tebow never slid. So that was kind of my motto. I was like, Tim Tebow never slid. I'm never sliding. So being physical, and that didn't really scare me or make me shy away. So some of those natural just instincts came probably more natural and easier than one would probably expect.
Is Mike Reed still the defensive backs coach there?
Yes, he is. Been here for a few years now, and he's still doing really good and still turning out some good cornerbacks.
He was a Mr. Irrelevant in the NFL draft.
Yes, he was. Not many people can say, but it's pretty cool.
What has he been able to do for you to make the transition easier and simpler?
He really deals with our corners, and then Mickey Kahn is really our safeties coach. We kind of have two DB coaches, but I've kind of worked with both of them here and there, and then they both run a lot with special teams, which playing safety, you're going to be on special teams. So I've worked with both of them. So I've worked with Coach Reed a lot, and particularly Coach Kahn, my first fall camp here after the first practice or two. First day, we kind of did one-on-ones. He asked me afterwards, you've never really played man coverage, have you? And I was like, no, I don't really know what I'm doing. I mean, I know the process of I'm trying to cover him, but there's a lot of technique and stuff that allows you to cover him. He definitely understood that. And Coach Kahn and Coach Reed as well give me tips and advice, particularly regarding just man coverage. And I think all of the defensive coaches have done a very good job with helping me with things that I haven't necessarily learned or been good at because I haven't got those same amount of reps as these guys that have played DB for their whole lives.
Have you tried to sell yourself as a long snapper yet?
I haven't. I have considered it, but once you become a long snapper, you become, like you said, a very valuable part of the team. And so you kind of get, I guess you could say, pigeonholed. And if you're the long snapper, you're the long snapper. And right now I'm having too much fun playing safety and playing on all the other special teams. This year was my second year. So my redshirt freshman year, I actually worked way up and I started on most of the special teams this year. I'm having too much fun doing that to sell myself as a long snapper yet. But if the day ever comes to where I think I could provide more value for the team or see the field more in that role, then I definitely still can do it.
Away from the gridiron, what do you like to do?
Clemson is right on the lake. which is cool for me because my grandparents had a lake house growing up, and I love going to the lake and driving jet skis. My freshman roommate has jet skis here because he lives here locally, and we'll get out on those. And I love hanging out on the water. And then I'm not a big gamer. My roommates always mess with me. They wish that I was more of a gamer so I could get on there and play Fortnite or play Madden with them. I'm really not. I just never have been. But probably my favorite thing to do is, and it sounds kind of cliche, but just I love hanging out with my family. They'll try to come to the games. My older sister and brother-in-law, even though he's coaching in fall ball and stuff, they were able to come to the Notre Dame game. They spent the weekend with us. And so that's really what I love to do outside of football.
We talked about this before the podcast started, and I'm remiss for not asking about it until now. But your grandfather was actually a very well-known coach in both Georgia and Alabama, and actually at one point was an assistant with your dad. That's pretty cool because during the football year, it's hard to get family together, and now all your family is right there.
Those few years of him working on the staff with my dad are probably some of my favorite years in football, maybe the favorite years of football. He and my grandma, they moved to the city that we were at, and he was retired from Georgia at the time. He was a longtime head coach. He won 300 plus games. He won state championships. He did it all. He actually had the all-time longest 10 plus win streak there in Georgia. He did it for 17 straight years. He won 10 plus games, which is really hard to do in high school, especially because you're only guaranteed 10 games and you have to win those games to even make the playoffs. After retiring, my dad got into high school coaching and he needed a defensive coordinator, and my granddad agreed that he'd come and just volunteer. He didn't have to teach. He was just a volunteer coach. And my grandma moved over with him, and they would rent a house and they lived there during football season. And then typically they'd go back during the off season. It was really neat. I mentioned my mom was a nurse. That was kind of the same time frame. So I remember we would leave football practice. We'd go to my grandma's house and she'd cook dinner. And most people, I think, would agree, especially in the South, that if your grandma is cooking dinner, then you were eating good. And so we would eat good every night. Actually, a really cool football story is my granddad, as the defensive coordinator, he kind of coached the linebackers. Myself and our other ball boy, who was my best friend, we were third and fourth, fifth grade. And one of us is the quarterback, one of us is the running back, and we're meshing and we're running and kind of his look team. And then he'd get on to us, right? Whatever we messed up, he'd let us hear about it. But those are some fun times. And I'm very thankful that we got to spend that time together. And although I wasn't on the team while he was coaching, I sure felt like I was on the team because of how much I was around and I did it all. And being with my granddad those years, that was a special time that not many people get.
I have to ask, what's the favorite meal that your grandmother made that you like?
Oh, goodness. It wasn't really just a set meal. It wasn't like, here's the theme. It was more of, I kind of made everything and you just get to pick what you want. They rented a really small house and a small kitchen, and you would not believe how many pots and pans can fit on the counter space that she has. And she makes a lot of really good food. Macaroni and cheese. She makes some sweet potato, not really casserole, but something with sweet potatoes that's amazing. Her green beans are great. Really anything she makes is really, really good.
Sounds like I need to get an invitation somehow.
The best, though, is if she says she has dessert, then you're really in for a treat. She makes some pretty mean pound cake and strawberry cake, and really any dessert that she's experimented with. I don't complain, that's for sure.
But does the athlete in you allow yourself to have dessert? I imagine that goes against what you normally can have.
Yes, but the good thing is, at the time of her cooking every night for us, I was still young and in those elementary school days, early middle school days where it didn't matter what I would eat. And now, yes, I mentally prepare that our Christmas is coming up or Thanksgiving's coming up. I know I'm going to her house. I know I'm going to eat. So I'm eating really clean right now. That way, when I get there and I eat it, it's not too much and it's okay. And the other good thing is running around and always being active, especially in like those high school days. And even now, I've always kind of been trying to gain a little bit of weight. So I like to think when I'm eating that piece of pound cake, she's just helping me reach my goal.
I wish I could have that problem.
I'm sure one day I won't have that problem, and I'll be thinking back to these years and how I took it for granted.
With the holidays upon us, what's a favorite holiday tradition in the Nix family?
Because my dad was a college coach originally, and you never know where you're going to be for Christmas. So we have a very flexible Christmas, which has honestly been really good. So my mom always says Christmas isn't a day, it's a season. And so my grandparents, both sides, have been great. If we're at their house on the 20th, not the 25th, it's still Christmas. And every year growing up, we'd all sleep in the same room on Christmas Eve. That was always really fun. We'd have a big breakfast that morning on Christmas morning. And we spent Christmas morning at quite a few places. Each grandparent's house, at a bowl game a couple times when I was little. So we do a lot of different stuff. I wouldn't say we have one tradition. we really just all get together, and that's where the fun is, just when we're all together and we're at one of our grandparents' house. We're just spending time together.
What's the favorite Christmas gift you ever got?
I remember I was probably 12 and Santa came and I didn't get an iPod and I was crushed. Later that night when we do Christmas with my grandma, Santa didn't bring it because he knew that she was bringing it. So I remember getting that gift that I loved.
I know you're still in college and you're pretty young, but where do you ultimately want to go professionally, whether that's play football, get into management? What do you want to do?
I think the goal right now would be to work in the NFL front office at an organization and probably be a GM. But that type of the scouting and the drafts and contracts and just evaluating players, that always has fascinated me. Each year when the draft rolls around, I'm all in on it and I'm kind of doing my own mock drafts. And I've always loved doing that. And then one thing we've always messed around with that I kind of hope eventually comes true is because we are a close family, we all go and do our own thing and be successful. And hopefully all of that works out. But we've always said that we want to just pick a random place that we all want to live. And my brother-in-law will be the baseball coach and we coach football and we just raise our kids there together and they can play for us. And instead of having to call and have these group FaceTimes, we can just go over to one person's house. It's always been like a running joke, but I think everybody kind of knows it's not really a joke. It's kind of what we all want to do. So those would be my career goals in the future.
For athletes that may not get to play the position they want at the next level, what advice do you have?
If there's anybody that is kind of in my same shoes and you put so much work in it, maybe a different sport, and maybe you play baseball and then you're going to have to pursue football or basketball because you can't play baseball at the next level, whatever it is. And I would say I put so much work in it being a quarterback, especially those high school years. I wanted to play quarterback in college so bad. And I remember when I first decided to walk on and play safety here, there was a part of me that was kind of like, I wouldn't say crushed, but just kind of disappointed. And I was like, I put all that work and all that time into being a quarterback and I just wasted all that time is kind of how I first saw it. And I think that for anyone that is in this situation, I don't think that that's a waste of time. Like when you put your heart into baseball and you work at it and it doesn't work out, or basketball or golf or whatever it is, that all that effort and stuff, it's not in vain. It wasn't worthless. The foundation and those habits and that work ethic, it's helping you whether or not it's in the athletic realm or when it's in the business world or being a dad or being a husband or whatever it is in the future, that those habits you build, that once that one kind of season of life is over, that opportunity is past, all that time that you spent is not wasted.
Caleb, I want to thank you so much for coming on the I Play Too podcast today. I enjoyed hearing your stories about football, growing up in a football family, going to Clemson. Thank you so much and continued success in the future.
Thank you so much for having me, and God bless.